About 2 years ago, I posted a story about a man named Bob who was harassing me at work. He'd follow me home, try and touch my hair, waist, and anything he could get away with. Shortly after I posted about that, I was offered a promotion at the same chain but in a store across town. I gladly accepted it, hoping that I could lose this creep and move on with my life. For a while, everything was good though. I made my new bosses aware of the situation, and as a precaution, they chose to continue having someone walk with me to and from my car, especially when working the night shift. Then, after about a year after I started, the calls began. My customer service clerks would answer, then transfer to me. They said he only ever asked for a manager, and when I picked up, the caller would hang up as soon as I finished my introduction, annoyingly. But whatever. Lots of kids did stuff like that. The calls progressed. It started with him not saying anything, and then it changed to, "Hey babe, do you miss me yet?" Not wanting to show whoever this was capable of affecting my behaviour, I'd just hang up. The calls then become far more menacing. "Hey sugar lips, I like your new car. Think you could get rid of me that easily?" And things like, "That's a cute top you're wearing. I could rip it off. I think you're invincible." You're not. You think you're invincible. Run into your bosses. They can't help you when you're alone. Soon after that, I saw his very distinct truck in the parking lot across the street. There's no way it wasn't him. My bosses insisted that it was just a coincidence, and said that we couldn't do anything since he wasn't actually on our property. It didn't matter though. Every time I walked to or from my car, that truck would be across the street every time. I knew it was Bob, but he had got smarter. Our cameras didn't reach far enough to see him. If you looked at the person in the driver's seat, you couldn't really make out features behind the hats and glasses and phone. I could always feel his stare piercing through the windshield. Pictures started showing up in the store's mail. At first it was of me standing by my car, sitting with someone outside at a break, or me walking to or from the store. We couldn't officially blame him, though I'm sure he was the one doing it. It then escalated to pictures of me counting stuff, standing in the store or interacting with other customers. All shots that had been taken about 20 or 30 meters away from me, but we still couldn't get him on any of the cameras. I became paranoid though. I couldn't get any work done for fear of seeing him next. My bosses were very understanding of this and moved me back to the room where I was, so that I could be away from all the customers and just work kind of like I used to. Then, one final shot came through though. It was a picture of me in the back of the store's operating room using our forklift with "Miss you, sugar lips" written across the back of it. Last August, I was accepted and started class at my dream school 2 hours away from home. I quit my beloved job and moved, hoping that this would finally give me some freedom. Then, about a week ago, I started seeing what I think is his truck rolling through the campus. Today, I found a note on my car with a picture of me talking to my boyfriend saying, "Miss me, don't you? Don't worry, not even he can protect you." When I was 10 years old, I lived in the deep south. Me and my parents lived in the woods in a little house that was a couple of miles from the tiny little town where I grew up in. To get to our house, you turned down a paved road, travelled approximately a mile, and we lived in the woods down a short dirt road to the left. There were other homes sort of nearby, but the woods separated all of us. So that also meant we had a lot of privacy. It was the summer and I was bored because I hadn't learnt to drive, and that meant that my summers were incredibly boring. My parents was not as sociable as I was, so I only had company or visited rarely when we went to churches and when we went shopping once a week in the nearest major city. Other than that, me and my mum just stayed there alone. In this little town, most people didn't even lock their doors, and it was and probably still is one of the safest towns in America. So in the summer, we would have all the doors and windows open and nothing locked, and never dreamt of anything going wrong at all. One day, my uncle and his wife and 3 kids showed up. His kids were my age and absolutely ecstatic. My mum never looked forward to these visits, so she just was not social, and our house was tiny. The kids had to camp out in the living room, so my mum knew my uncle was coming and she didn't look forward to it. But he wasn't due for another couple of weeks, but for some reason he decided to come early. It was a summer evening when me and my 3 cousins were out running around the yard playing like little kids do, when my cousins got to arguing. My uncle wasn't in the living room. He called them in and made them sit down for a while until they could learn to behave. And I wish they could, but I stayed outside and practiced cartwheels, something that I was desperately trying to learn before the school started. I then noticed that this big guy came walking into the yard. I didn't really look at him in the face. I could tell you that he was tall, chubby, somewhat muscular, and not wearing a shirt. He was carrying a limb. I don't know what kind it was. It's something that was just weird. It might have even been a big stick, but I didn't know. It looked like it was flexible also, almost like a whip. I don't know why he carried it. Maybe it was to hit dogs if they tried to attack him. Who knows? He walked by me and I stopped what I was doing and was curiously staring, as nobody visited us ever, and they usually drove up the yard and wouldn't just walk. He then walked past me and went on to knock on our screen door. My mum came up to the door and he then told her that he was lost. He said he was staying with some people and he wasn't from here, and went to the store with them, and they drove off and forgot him and he didn't know how to get back to the house. My mum, this is our idea by the way, not sure why, decided that she would call this lady that lived down the road from us and ask if their teenage sons would drive up and pick him up and help him get back to where he was staying. My mum then left him standing there on the porch as she went away to go and make the phone call to the people who she needed to. That was something that was a little off, but he then did something that I thought was very strange. He opened the screen door and stuck his head in and started looking around. Of course he saw my uncle, who was like this big, strong, stocky guy sitting on the couch. My mum called this lady and her boys drove up and got him pretty quickly and he was gone. We didn't think much of it until my uncle and the family left, because we were too busy and I was having too much fun. But after my uncle's family left at the end of the week, we found some things out. First of all, the guy we found wasn't lost at all. A relative that lived at the end of the road where you turn off to head to ours said that they had seen this guy walking around our house for about 2 hours for 3 days in a row. He was carrying a big stick or whatever you want to call it with him, and he would just stay for a while and then just walk back, almost as if he was scouting it out. Then, a few days later, the ladies whose son gave him a lift told my mum the following, that she wasn't sure exactly who it was, and she made sure that her sons went up to our exact location just for safety. She also told my mum that we needed to stay in her house and keep all the doors locked because this guy was up to no good. Thinking of it now, I believe that he had been watching and saw a small woman and a little girl home alone all day with all the doors and windows unlocked. He also seemed to know exactly when my dad would leave for work and get back, because he would never be there when my dad was, so I got this feeling that he'd been watching us for a while. I'm a female in my early 20s and I'm only very small. I live alone with my 3-year-old daughter. We lived in a 3-bedroom home with a large back section and a long driveway. One of the rooms is used for storage, and my daughter is slowly transitioning into sleeping in her own bed. On this particular night, she had a really bad nightmare and she had crawled into bed with me. I am utterly terrified of everything. I mean, really. I absolutely hate living by myself. I literally get freaked out by the smallest little thing or noise outside at night, and I tend to keep awake for at least half an hour while I try and determine whether or not any sounds that I hear is a threat. It never is, it's just horribly paranoid me. Because of this paranoia, I make sure that all the doors and windows are locked securely before going to bed each night. But anyway, this happened to me after Christmas. It was around 1 AM. This was nothing unusual for me because I'm a night owl, and I began hearing some noises outside. I assumed it was a possum, as I'd been having problems with them recently, but turned the laptop volume down to listen just in case. My paranoid mind was already informing me that since it was after Christmas, it was somebody breaking in trying to steal presents. I then heard scurrying in the grass, which went on for a while, back and forth at the rear end of the house. I figured it was a bit strange that the possum wasn't making good its god-awful noise as usual. That's when the rattling started. The rattling started in the kitchen and moved round to my daughter's room, then mine, then finally to the lounge. Someone was trying the windows, I assumed. I grabbed my phone and slid out of bed, pressing my back up against the bedroom door. I could then hear someone talking outside, which made me figure that it was more than just one person. I was terrified as I was dialing the emergency service. I then swore that I heard more footsteps inside the house. At this point, my heart was thumping so loud that my breath came out in the same pattern. I'm on the phone with the emergency service now, trying to listen to what was going on, back pressed up against the door, fearing that the door handle would turn at any moment and I'd be pushed on the ground with any force. At this point, there were still footsteps inside. I didn't know if it was just noises of the house or if whoever it was outside had finally managed to get in. They were coming from my daughter's room, which is right next to mine. My daughter, by the way, is quite happily sleeping, obviously in my bed, whilst I'm on the phone to the operator. I was trying my best to stay quiet on the phone, as I knew the people outside at the window were right next to my room. Now, I'm not sure if they heard me or something, or if they'd just given up, but they had disappeared before the police could arrive. I was terrified to step out of my room when I heard them at the door, in case these people were inside of my house waiting for me. My bedroom door and the front door are only a couple of steps away from each other, but that didn't make it any less scary as I threw it open and ran to the front door to unlock it. One officer stayed inside with me, checked the house and took my statement, while the other checked around the outside. They both said they couldn't find anything and asked me to describe the voice. It's a male's voice, I told them. I told them that he was either crazy or talking to himself, or there was more than one of them. I told them how that I thought that they had gotten inside, but after the police had done a thorough walk around, I guess it was just my mind. Needless to say, I got no sleep that night, and as soon as the sun rose, I was throwing open all the curtains. The lounge was the last place I went. I opened the final curtain. I was then able to see that the lock on the window was open. There was also a dirty footprint on the window still, and more dirt smeared onto the carpet. I did a thorough check of the house after that, and nothing was taken, nothing was out of place, and the more I thought about it, the more I began to think that the voice belonged to my ex. Now, we are in court at the moment because he's done something to my daughter that I will say another time, so access was instantly taken away from him, or rather, my aunt, shall I say, pushed him back to take it to court, and things have been a bit sour since then. If it was actually him, I am terrified to think of what he wanted. He was physically and sexually violent towards me, but the fact of the matter is, he didn't even try my room. He went straight to my daughter's room, which is even more worrying as I have never let him in or near to my house, so how did he know where he was going? What did he want? What did he want to do with my daughter? I live alone usually, but luckily for me, I wasn't home alone last night. I was with this skinny guy that I'll just call John. For context, I'm 5'5" and John is a skinny 6-foot footballer. We just went off to bed. I was so tired and ready to pass out, but John's friends had other plans in the form of constant Facebook messages. Instinctively, I said that I think you should go up and check your phone to John, thinking something bad had happened. He eventually got up and went into the living room where his phone was charging. He later told me that the sliding door was open and the cat was staring at something. My cat is usually the most cuddly little thing, but he was just staring this time. He then said that there's someone in the house. John said as he come back into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. "Come again?" I replied. "There's someone in the lounge room," he repeated. It took me a few minutes to process what had just been said. I got up and grabbed my gym clothes and hockey stick, but by the time we got out of my bedroom they had left. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, so I knocked on my landlord's door. "Someone's broke into my house," I called out beyond the fly screen. "What?" she yelled back to me, almost very taken back by what I'd said. She then called for her husband and we searched the property and we found nothing. "How do you think they got in?" my landlord asked, and I said that I didn't lock my sliding door so that if somebody needs to they can let my cat in. "Yeah, I didn't lock my door," I replied sheepishly. But in my defense, not many people do, so I didn't think I needed to because it was safe. They then said that they suggested we just go back inside and lock our doors. They said they would call the police and see what was happening. John and I then went back inside and went to look if anything was missing and write down everything. We sat and reflected on the events of the evening when my landlord came over. The cops said to file a report in the morning. "Meanwhile, get some sleep," he said, and we went back to bed. I wasn't able to get any sleep initially, though later into the night I could get some. As I was laying there, I was in a semi-lucid state. I was awoken by the sound of the alarm going off. I froze. "What's that alarm?" I asked, hardly moving. "Yep," John replied. We got up and put our clothes back on. We could hear that it was a smoke alarm this time, and we went out looking for the culprit. We could then see that the fly screen door had been forced open. "We're going to the police station," I said. John drove to the cop shop and I took the hockey stick to open the gate and keep it closed, just in case they were still there. We drove to the police station and they took a statement. This morning they sent the forensic squads to do some dusting for prints. They pulled heaps off our door, but the part that scared me the most was when they asked to dust my bedroom window. The fly screen had been bent and pulled, but not totally off. They found 3 good sets of prints, and the weird thing was that they were all completely different. I grew up in a small foothill town just south of Teo, where this whole mess happened. It was a few years back, but I frequently think about it. I'm a fairly tall girl on the thinner side. I've been convinced that my height was a factor in deterring creepy people away and ever bothering me. I used to run through this smaller sub-neighbourhood with my mum's friend frequently when I was about 17, around the time when this happened. I was on my own and about 10 minutes into my run, but not exhausted luckily when this began. I saw an all-white van driving near me when I entered the neighbourhood. I had headphones in, so I wasn't aware that it had been following me for a great deal of time. Another 10 minutes passed and I looked back. I could see that the van was still there, only it was parked this time. I got kind of creeped out at this point, but I figured it would just be best to turn directly back and stare at them, making sure that they were fully aware that I knew they were there. I don't know why, but it just seemed like the only option I had at the time, and I'd been told in self-defense class to make eye contact and stand your ground, so I guess that's what I tried to do. I could see a young guy, maybe in his mid to late 20s, driving the van, but I couldn't quite see who was in the passenger seats at the time, but someone was definitely there. I felt like I had been staring them down for at least a couple of minutes and none of us were moving. The passenger side door then opens and steps out this beautiful young blonde woman. She couldn't have been older than 30. She just kind of stood there staring back at me and beckoned with her friend and tried to get me to come towards her, smiling the entire time. After she beckons and I didn't respond, she opens a sliding door and two young children step out. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't impossible that these were the legitimate kids to these two people, but I'm not so sure. They're all blonde and white and look very similar, between the ages of 5 and 7, with one boy and one girl. Once the kids came out of the van, I had an initial feeling of relief, thinking that maybe it was just a family who was readjusting their situation in the van. Then I began thinking maybe it was more sinister than I had initially thought. I had been a nanny for a while, and at this point, new kids could be very fussy. Once I could actually see the kids' faces and the empty vacant look in their eyes, my panic quickly returned. The woman tried to take the hand of the youngest girl and she ripped her hand away. I don't know if the woman could see my facial expression change or start to turn, because I then ran away, but she went into a full charge and ran towards me like an Olympic track star, I swear. I was just freaking out. I just turned and sprinted away as fast as I possibly could. She ran after me for a block or two, honestly, much farther than I ever thought she would be able to. When I turned back, I could see the van in full force driving towards me, with her still on foot making ground. She looked like a quiet homemaker, but the fact that this lady could run this fast still haunts me to this day. I ended up hopping the fence of a nearby neighbour's house that had a dog I was friends with. I hid behind the fence and I could hear them get out of the van and approach it. At this point, I was terrified. There's no way I was looking up for them again. My neighbour's dog's friend thankfully saved the day by going crazy barking at them, which scared them off. As insane as these people were, I guess they didn't want to deal with that. I have since told this story to several people, including the police, all of whom say that I have just massively overread the situation and that nobody wanted anything from me other than directions. Yeah, right. Abductions are something that basically never happens in a small town, so I guess that accounts of this makes for skepticism. One of the cops even said that I don't seem to fit the meek body type people usually troll around to kidnap. Regardless of what anyone says, I'm never going to accept the fact that they just wanted directions from me. I still had the gut feeling that I stick to today that this was something far more sinister. I'll preface this story by saying that I moved from out of state at the beginning of 8th grade, and I'm 19 now, and would ride the school bus with the same group of people from a very large neighbourhood that was right next to mine for 5 years. Most of the kids had either known each other or had been friends their entire lives, so throughout the duration of this time, I didn't have anyone that I could really talk to on the bus. I would just have my headphones in the whole time. This isn't the most extreme or scary story compared to others, but it's deeply disturbing and unsettling for me. I've moved around a lot, so I thought nothing of having a lot of random people from my new location adding me on Facebook. There was this guy called John, who started chatting to me for a little while, and he told me he rode my bus. He seemed pretty normal, and I didn't really think much about it. After that conversation, we never spoke to each other again, online or in person, but I always saw him sitting a few seats away from me on the bus. I even sat by him a few times when there were no other empty seats on the bus. Now fast forward to my junior year of high school, I'd started smoking cigarettes and would walk to this park in my neighbourhood a few minutes down the street every time I wanted to smoke. I am someone who is always aware of my surroundings. I never saw anyone around me while I was doing this, but then again, the park was enclosed by a bunch of trees. One day, I saw that I had a new message on Instagram that consisted only of a picture of a spot at the park I sat at every time I smoked. No caption or follow-up. I checked the profile to see who it was sent by, and it was sent by that same John. I was severely creeped out by this, and I was not a confrontational person at all, so I never called him out on it when I saw him. Though I did have nightmares of him after that about him stalking me. Now, fast forward to my senior year. Again, there was another guy who sat next to me. This one was called Mark, and he started talking to me. We quickly become friends after having ridden together for 5 years and never talking. We sat together and talked every day after that. He then told me stories about the other guys from the neighbourhood. I then quietly asked him if he knew about John, and he told me that he really creeped me out and told me about him and that some things happened last year. He laughed nervously and said, "Don't even get me started." I kept pushing the subject, asking what he meant by that, but he was visibly uncomfortable and told me, "He's been on to you since the 8th grade. There's a lot to it. I'll have to text you it." And I then felt my stomach turn. When I got home, I got this really long text from him explaining how that John had always spoke about me to his friends. I'd almost forgotten I was friends with him on social media because he never interacted with my posts or anything, but he talked about me as though he knew me apparently. He would then go on about how hot he thought I was and say loads of weird other things about me. I never saw him though, and the thing was, he would even say about how he knows that exact spot I go to in the park. Again, I never saw him there. I then decided that I had to block him on Facebook and Instagram. Almost instantly, I started getting creepy anonymous messages on Tumblr, one of which was him telling me how he loved me. I gave him a weird response and thought that it would stop him, but he again kept on following me with different usernames and accounts. I kind of hoped that that would be the end of it. I then spoke to Mark about a concert I was going to and really excited about in a couple of weeks. It was a small basement show, so there wasn't that many people going. It was with my best friend Jack, who I'd also filled in on the situation, and we was having a great time jumping around singing until I could feel someone staring at me. I turned around and saw John staring at me 20 feet away, blank-faced, just by himself staring at me. I moved behind Jack to get out of his field of vision, but he kept on repositioning himself so he could see me. I felt like I was going to throw up and rushed outside. A while later, I was talking on the bus with Mark, and he told me that John had a bunch of pictures of me saved onto his phone, some taken from my social media and some taken of me stalker fashion when I was sitting down or walking at school. I started to get really bad anxiety riding the bus, knowing that I was around this guy and that I was then constantly having to look over my shoulder at school and decide if I was going to have to tell the principal about everything that happened with him. I did, and then he decided to get the police involved. So I waited for them to show up and take my statement. A few days later, I was pulled aside by an adult to tell me that John and his parents had been talked to and that I shouldn't have to worry anymore, but to be honest, I still do. I was 19 years old at the time. I'd been out of school for a year, and it had not been a good year for me. I had opted out of college and had only been able to find a restaurant job in this tiny town where I grew up, and I was still living with my parents. I felt like a complete loser. My closest friends had either gone away to college or gotten jobs in the nearest major city and also moved away. The following year, a relative of my dad's helped me get a new job with a company. It didn't pay much, but it also had some great benefits though. It meant that I had a future and chance of advancements. I almost got a new car and I was on my way and really excited about it. To celebrate, I was spending the weekend with my two best friends who were already living in the city, in this great apartment, where lots of other college kids also lived. We were planning to go out to this club, and I had a painful breakup right out of school because of the restaurant where I worked hours, so I'd not been able to get out and meet new guys or hang out with my new friends at all, so this would have been great for me. Anyway, my two friends and I, we're all female by the way, were planning on a night of partying. I was hoping to dance and socialise, etc. So the first thing we did after work was go to buy new outfits to wear. We came back to their apartment, we did the hair and makeup thing and we were all ready to go out. My friend Gillian said that she suddenly wasn't feeling well and decided to stay in, so the other friend and I took off for a night of fun. We made our way there in our new car and went to this first club that was very popular in the city at the time. My friend then told me that it was usually very crowded and that there was a lot of college kids and people our age from the surrounding counties and general area that all liked to hang out there because the music was so good. That Friday night, I guess something was off however, because there just wasn't that many people in there. But there was a group of baseball players who were in town to play a local university. Since we were too young to drink, we ordered a Coke and basically drank it all night. Neither of us had much money by the way. I danced with some of the baseball players, but most of them were gearing up and going to the bartenders to try and hit on them after finding out that I wasn't interested in what they wanted to do. So I was just there with my Coke. However, my friend did find this one guy and he kind of attached himself to her and they basically danced the whole evening. So as the night went on, it got emptier and emptier and it seemed kind of odd. And most of the baseball players and the few other people in there gradually left. At this point, I'm bored to tears, disappointed in how the night was going and wishing my friend would come on, so we could either go to another club or get back to the apartment. But I think I sat there for hours. Then, finally, at around 1 AM, the club was closing because there were so few people in there. It is then at this point that my friend informs me that we're going to give this baseball player, I'll just call him Bill, a ride back to the motel where he was staying. I knew this motel. It was completely on the opposite side of the city from where the apartment was located. I wasn't happy, but it'd been a while since I got to hang out with my friends, so I wasn't going to refuse. So then Bill went outside while my friend went to the restroom. I came out a few seconds behind him and he was on the phone. He was talking to someone on the phone, telling them that he would be back shortly. For a brief second, a little red flag went up inside me, but it was gone before I had time to think. I just wanted to take him to the motel and get it over with. Well, the three of us drove there. He sat in the front with us. We get there and he doesn't get out right away like you'd think. He kept sitting in the car and making casual conversation with my friend, and I was sitting there thinking, get out. But once again, I'm a nice person. I didn't want to get on my friend's nerves, etc. But even she was starting to get restless because it just didn't make sense for him to keep sitting there and talking about practically nothing. Well, us two small town girls didn't have the car doors locked. All of a sudden, there was this huge guy besides my car and another at the passenger side. Bill, the guy we'd given the ride to, gets out of the car and casually walks away. These two guys start pulling us out of the car. I had dealt with issues with guys when I'd grown up with, but once I got to the point across where that no means no, they all suddenly backed off and it felt like the situation was gone. So I wasn't that afraid. My friend and I were even sort of laughing at first. We thought that they were just joking. We both grabbed hold of the steering wheel and were hanging on for it for dear life, and I was trying to explain to this guy why we're not getting out of the car as he reaches in. He suddenly grabs my middle finger and bends it back painfully, and I let go of the steering wheel. He then pulls me out of the car and the other guy had my friend out, and I didn't really see what was going on with her as she was behind me, but I could sort of hear her struggling. The guy then had me by the arm and started dragging me across the parking lot towards the stairs. He was about 6'2", built and athletic, and he was actually good looking, and I was wondering what was going on, but I was still not accepting the fact that I was actually in danger. All the while that he's dragging me, first across the parking lot, and then up the stairs, I'm steadily telling him how that it's not a good idea for me to go to his room and everything else I could say to try and get him to let go of me. I was trying to pull my arm away from his, but he had me in a death grip, and I'm only about 5'3" and a half and 115 pounds. The whole time I'm talking to him and struggling with him, he never says a word. He was just stone cold silent. He dragged me to the open door of a motel and shoved me inside, and there were baseball players everywhere. Some were in the bed sleeping, some were on the floor, some were sitting around watching TV. The guys were awake, were looking up at me curiously. I was trying not to step on any of them as doing so because it seemed as if they were literally everywhere. This guy dragged me over to the nearest restroom and made some older guy who was sleeping get up and shoved me onto the empty space the other guy left. At this point, I knew I was in trouble. Some guy came to the door and I stood up, and when I did, he basically body slammed me backwards onto the bed. He went to the door and was standing just outside on the balcony talking to the person, and I decided that this would be my only chance to run. Then suddenly one of the guys tries to grab me, but he wasn't able to get a good grip so I could keep on going. My friend met me at the door. She was coming from the opposite direction. We had both ran right by him literally, and that was the guy who dragged me up the stairs and the guy he was talking to. We took those concrete stairs in some sort of dressy mess because we had heels on and weird shoes, and I was so scared of falling, but I took it 2 steps at a time. I glanced behind me and the 3 guys were after us, and I didn't know how we managed to outrun them. We then quickly got into the car because the doors were still unlocked, and we got in and it was very clear that they were still chasing us. We locked the doors and took off. We spun out of the parking lot and they even chased the car. We got back to my friend's apartment and we were sort of freaked out and in disbelief and shocked that this had actually happened. I felt super nervous and very nauseous and did not feel like I could go to sleep, even though it was now the very early hours of the morning. We decided we would go to an all-night fast food joint and drink coffee and talk about what happened. I then went into another room to go and grab my jacket when we heard a knock on the door. My friend at some point had told Bill where the apartment was. We stayed inside really quiet with the 3 of the guys banging on the door and yelling for us to open it. Finally, someone else yelled out if they didn't be quiet they would call the cops, and that's when they left. We were too scared to go outside and get coffee at this point. We did discuss calling the cops, but we rationalised that this town loves their sports and they would probably just take their word over ours. I know in retrospect that we should have reported it to the university, but we just didn't think about it at the time. That was a bad choice, I know. So anyway, I'm just thankful that nothing ever actually come of this and I'm actually able to write this now. So this happened a while ago when I was about 16 or 17. I'm 22 now, but still shaken up when home alone as a result of it. I was always up late at the time, usually on my laptop or playing Xbox with my headphones in. When I took them off, that was the time that I would just lay back then fall asleep. Every night was the same, so this night was no different. I was a few seconds away from falling asleep at about 2 AM on a school night, and I suddenly hear a loud banging on the fence. It kind of sounded like somebody was struggling to climb it, but only more menacing. It was always locked, so if you wanted to come into somebody's yard, you had to buzz in or open it with a key, of course. I jumped right out of bed and looked through my window, since it was facing the left side of the house where our driveway is, and I saw nothing. I thought it was the dogs messing around, so I just went back to bed. At this point, I was so sleepy that I couldn't have even cared if it was anything, and I wanted to go to sleep. It then got really weird the next morning when I saw that both the dogs were leaving my sister's room, which means that they were sleeping there the whole night, and she told me they were growling like mad at the window at some point, but I still didn't think too much of it because I don't get scared or panic very easily. So I continued my every night routine the only way that I know, with my headphones on and without a care in the world, dropping dead after I couldn't look at the screen anymore. But one night, about 2 weeks later, I heard Frodo, our dog, probably the largest dog that you've ever seen, barking like crazy downstairs in the living room. I was quite shaken by this because it's not often he barks that mad. So I went downstairs to check out what was happening and found him just sitting there, looking through the big glass sliding door and at the back of the yard growling. I asked him what was wrong, but he couldn't even turn his head and acknowledge me, so I trusted his instinct. But I just decided that I would go back upstairs and go to bed, and then I heard it, a really loud bang, the same one I heard 2 weeks ago, but this time an automatic light sensor went off outside, which is high enough to reach to where a person's movements are, but not low enough to react to dogs. That's when I felt cramps in my stomach and I just kind of froze there, remembering what had happened 2 weeks earlier. So I just kind of stood there frozen, waiting, listening, when I could actually hear the slow steps outside on the ice breaking the snow. It felt like hours that I was stood there, then suddenly the dog started barking his lungs out again, jumping and scratching on the glass, so probably that somebody would run away, because seconds later I heard another really loud bang on the fence, but not followed by steps or anything. At this point, my father came downstairs to see what was going on, and I explained everything to him. He immediately went out to investigate and of course found nothing. He kind of blamed me for being too paranoid and said that the dog probably saw a cat. Yeah, as if. So I had no choice to forget about the incident. The next night I decided not to use my headphones just in case anything else happened. This time it was about 1:20 and I'll never forget. I got to the window just to look out and I see a man standing on our driveway, looking to our backyard. I ducked so he couldn't see me, but I silently kept an eye on him. I left our other dog, called Sam, outside that night. It was wintry but warm enough for him to be out, and at some point he came running to the fence, barking and scaring the guy away. I immediately ran to my parents' room and told them exactly what was going on. My mum got worried and believed me, and my dad just rolled his eyes and went downstairs. I stayed with my mother that night, and in the morning my annoyed father told me that he spent the whole night up there and found nothing, and said I imagined it all. The next day was Friday, and it was my best friend's birthday. One of my other friends, Rhiannon, asked me to stay at my house that night because she lived such a long way away. At around 2 p.m, we left the party and go back to my place. We wanted to have another drink or two, so I wanted to get us some wine, which was kept in our wine cellar outside the house. You have to go through our front door and off the deck to get into the old garage where all of the wine is. But we didn't use it just for that, we had other storage in there. So you have to go through another door and down 12 steps to get to the wine cellar, which is underground. Right under the living room where the fireplace was lit all night so the house was warm. And some of the warmth also come down into the cellar, but that room was always crazy scary at night, so I made Rhiannon wait for me at the top of the stairs. I remember her saying, "What if someone's down there?" as a joke to scare me, and I just laughed it off, but I did have this really weird feeling in my stomach. As I walked down, I noticed the smell of wine was a lot more intense than it usually is, and somehow that freaks me out even more, but hey, can't deny my friend a bottle of wine, can I? At that moment, at the bottom of the stairs, I started laughing to Rhiannon. See, I made it alive. We both laughed and I turned on a light. Suddenly, I had a heart attack, shock and panic. At first I just stood there, froze, and about 20 seconds later my screaming come out. Rhiannon was screaming too, even though she didn't know what was going on. There was a man sleeping in the corner, covered with old dirty blankets and a long white beard, with a big black coat on and a bottle of our wine in his hands. As I started screaming, he woke up and started shushing me. Not sure the reason for doing this, and I wasn't running at this point. He tried to come closer, and that's when I fled up the stairs. This dude then seemed to get really angry and even tried to grab my legs as I attempted to run away. How creepy is that? Rhiannon was already at our door, ringing the doorbell, screaming, and then was my saviour, my dad, holding his shotgun. He just sensed something was off. I told him everything, and he told us just to wait outside. He went down there to the crime scene, and all we heard was my father screaming in a way that I've never heard him before, and not minutes later 2 police cars arrived. My mother called them, and my dad returned with this weird guy up the stairs, and they took him away in a car. We later found out that this was just a local homeless alcoholic man who was looking for a warm spot, and he took 30 bottles of our wine, and he was also smoking down there, and he did it in a way that could have burnt down the entire house. I know nothing ever happened, but the idea that somebody was just living literally underneath where my whole family was just terrifies me to this day. Yes, he's known, but whether he's known or not, who knows if his intentions could have changed if he kept on drinking. I just never want to meet him again. Hello everyone, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any suggestions for future videos, then please leave them in the comments for me below, as well as any other suggestions that you have for me. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. I know I've been saying for a bit that I'll try and get other narrators on the channel, and I was meant to feature my brother this week actually, who's that creepypasta guy, but he did a lot of recordings for me. But he used the wrong microphone, then he did it again, but the audios didn't work at all. None of the audio worked on it. So yeah, that happened. And he's actually doing some for me right now as I speak, and I'm looking at where he's doing it and he can't see me. That's quite funny. And yeah, so I just shout out to my brother, that creepypasta guy. So go and subscribe to him as well if you already haven't, and show him some love. And yeah, thank you. And if this video gets over 1,000 likes, we're gonna raise the stakes again. I'll make 3 tea, or I won't because we ran out of tea bags. But when the time comes, I'll make 3 tea bags. No, sorry, 3 teas, and put it on Twitter because I'm getting a bit mental now. I'm starting to get worried by my own antics, but I should hold on. But yeah, thank you everyone. So yeah, I hope everyone's well, and I really appreciate you all and hope you're having a really good day. I'll talk to you soon. See you everyone.